Hello there, it's been another dry week across much of the UK. That said, we did see a few showers over the weekend, but not for everyone, and northern parts of the UK still wondering where the rain has gone. Of course, we went through the whole of the autumn and winter season without many dry days at all. It was very wet. Farmers were struggling to get onto the fields to get some of the sugar beet out of the ground. And here we are in April, having had much of the second half of March completely dry, and not a great deal of rain this month either. Now these two maps here kind of highlight that quite well. The map on the left that you see here is based on radar estimates, and it basically shows so far, so this is up until the 20th of April, about 2/3 of the way through the month, how much rain we've had compared to normal, compared to the long-term average. So given the position of the month, or as I say, about 2/3 of the way through, that's 67% if you like, you would expect most of the country to be somewhere in the white category by now. And yet many are still in the dark browns, and you can see quite widely actually in the dark brown too. Western Scotland, not quite so dry here. We have had a bit of rain here, rainfall close to normal I guess, and actually across some central southern parts of England. So we had quite a few heavy showers, some longer spells of rain actually on Friday into Saturday on the weekend just gone, and that's actually helped lift the rainfall totals here. We saw 25-30 millimetres in some places here during the course of the weekend. So rainfall close to normal here. But elsewhere across the UK very much well below. The map on the right shows how many days since the last time it rained. So you can quite clearly see across central southern parts of the UK it rained over the weekend, hence the 2s and 3s showing up there 2 days ago, 3 days ago it last rained. But across northern England there are many stations here now that have gone 2 whole weeks without a single drop of rain, and that includes any dew that gets measured by the rain gauges around the UK as well. So much of northern England, southern Scotland, a fortnight of no rain at all, and that also includes northeast Scotland as well. And there's not really a great deal of rain to talk about over the next few days. We'll come on to that in just a few moments. It shouldn't really come as a surprise. We showed this graph back in early February. This is for the East Anglia region, as you can see, but what it's basically comparing is the last 10 years, so the last 30 years between 1990 and 2019, compared with the 30 years before that, 1960 to 1989, for rainfall across East Anglia. And what it clearly shows is, in the more recent 30-year period, April and March have become a lot drier than they used to be. And so this year, well, we've continued that trend, of course. February on this graph has become a lot wetter. We saw that this year as well. So the longer term trends continue to play out this year. This year fits quite nicely in with the longer term trends. So it's no real surprise that March and April have been quite dry this year, because that's how it has been quite often over recent years, and February of course getting wetter, as you can see there. And also notice an increase in rainfall too across parts of October, November. Autumns are getting wetter. February is getting notably wetter. Of course, February statistically is the driest month of the year, but now that all seems to be shifting a bit more towards March and April. The problem with that is, of course, is if the high pressure is more prevalent in April than March or even February, sunshine is stronger, there's more sun hours during the day, and so evaporation rates are higher than if that same weather event were to occur earlier in the year, which of course dries out the soils. And we've seen quite a rapid change in the soil moisture content over the last few months. Now these two graphs here show the soil moisture content at 2 locations, one in Norfolk on the top there, West Norfolk near King's Lynn, and the bottom one in Rothamsted down in the home counties. And clearly through the winter seasons, you can see the black line is the observed value of soil moisture, the grey line is the average for the time of the year, and the blue and the red areas basically mark the upper and lower limit of the whole record. So anything in the red is the driest on record, if you like, and anything in the blue is on the wetter side. And now through the winter, autumn winter, that black line is pretty much bang on average. It's high moisture content in the soils. Of course, it was very wet through the winter, which is to be expected. But notice how quickly that comes back down as we've gone through March and into April. In fact, incredibly low levels of soil moisture actually across some of these sites in eastern England in particular, levels that are lower than you would expect for July. And we're not even into the summer season yet. Now notice Rothamsted on the bottom there, they had an inch of rain over the weekend just gone from those thundery showers pushing up from the channel, and that's actually lifted the soil moisture back up. As you can see, it comes back up again right at the end of that graph there. But places such as West Norfolk here, where we didn't see those showers or spells of rain, still on the downside. for the time being, really, for the foreseeable future. So interesting to see such a rapid change from completely saturated soils over the winter to incredibly dry soils now, and not helped by the fact that we've had some very dry continental air and very strong winds also helping to take a lot of moisture out of the top layers of the soils as well. So rain, is there any in the forecast? We're being asked that quite a lot on our phone line in the office. The short answer is no in the short term at least. High pressure, as you can see there over Scandinavia, continues to dominate. We've got lower pressure across parts of France and Germany. Here you can see some showers or longer spells of rain. Between the two, quite a pressure gradient, the number of isobars there, so quite a strong drying easterly wind. Now over the coming days, that high pressure will continue to nudge its way westwards and gradually weaken by the weekend. And notice actually by the time we get through to the end of the week, Friday and into the weekend, there's no real dominant area of pressure. It's not necessarily high pressure, it's not necessarily low pressure, it's very slack. And that makes forecasting a little bit tricky because when you get slack conditions, you can get local sea breezes and so forth, which can, on a local scale, develop a few showers. So it's possible towards the end of the week and into the weekend, we might just see a few showers cropping up here and there, but I don't think they'll be widespread. The upper pattern in the upper atmosphere is still very much ridged, so even if we do see a few showers, they'll probably be quite isolated through the weekend, and a lot of dry weather still likely to prevail then through the weekend as well, despite the fact we may just see the odd shower here and there. Now in terms of spraying, another aspect of course quite popular at this time of the year, certainly on the phone lines. Here's an update on the graph that we've been showing for the last few weeks or so. So the week before last was the best spraying week, if you like, with the lightest winds and more in the way of high pressure. Last week just gone, we of course had some rain and showers at the end of the week and into the weekend. It was a bit breezy at times as well, and so overall those spraying hours have come down, but only a little bit, still well over 100 across the UK. And just to reiterate, what we're seeing here is the number of spraying potential hours across the UK. That's where the hour was dry, no rain was recorded, and the winds were below 10 miles an hour. This includes overnight as well, so perhaps a little bit overestimating your spraying potential if you only spray during the day. But average across the UK, 119 hours the week before last, 104 hours the week just gone. So still above 100, but coming down a touch because we did have a bit more in the way of showery activity over the weekend or so. And this week started off on a pretty windy note, so actually spraying potential the first few days this week has been a bit tricky, especially across the southern half of the UK where those easterly winds have been strongest. Closer to the high across northern Britain, the winds have been a bit lighter, so more spraying potential here. And actually running this sequence through the rest of the week, the greens cover much of the UK from midweek onwards because the winds will be falling a bit lighter. As I say, the pressure pattern becomes slacker, so the winds become lighter, and so there's more spraying potential to be had later on this week, bar the odd shower, which may hinder spraying opportunities. But overall, I think there will be quite a bit of spraying opportunity to come over the coming days and through into the weekend as well. So good news there if you're trying to get out and about onto the fields. But will it rain? That's the big question, and we've shown this table a few times before. If you want rain, ideally you're looking for the green colours, and there's not a great deal of them at the moment. It has to be said, a lot of brown dominating in this chart. So basically what this table is showing is the chance of it being dry on each day going forward during the next 4 weeks or so at various locations around the UK. The locations down the left and the forecast date going along the top. Now, where there's a lot of confidence, these ensemble members that we use to make these forecasts will cluster together and you're more likely to get a stronger signal. So you can clearly see for the first 4 days, quite widely, very high chance that it's going to be dry for those 4 days. Towards the weekend, we start to lose the VHs and they become more Hs. Now, still more likely to be dry than wet, but that's just that hint that there could be maybe a couple of showers around here and there by the time we get through to the weekend and the beginning of next week. But I will stress, even at this stage, I don't think they're going to be too widespread. There's still a lot of ridging going on high up in the atmosphere, which will restrict just how many showers we do see develop. But there could be a few by the weekend and into the beginning of next week. Now, there is a slightly stronger signal towards the second half of next week. So we're talking around the sort of 29th, 30th of April, right at the end of the month, and then through into the first weekend of May, that the Atlantic may start to take over a bit more. It could be quite a slow progress, trying to get some of these fronts in, but it does look like it will turn a bit more unsettled late next week and into the weekend, and perhaps the beginning of the following week. And so you can see even by that stage we're starting to lose those brown H's. It becomes M which is basically 50-50 chance of it being wet or dry on a given day. And even some places getting into some of the green colours, the L's there, showing up by the time we get through to early May. So just a sign that perhaps towards the end of next week, it's a very slow process at breaking things down, increasing the risk of a few heavy showers developing, maybe even some longer spells of rain in places as well. Now, it's still early days, but it does look like after that, looking at this data at least, that things may become a bit more settled again towards the middle of the month, more H's reappearing, and the Atlantic perhaps becoming a bit less of an influencing factor. We'll have to see. A long way off, but interesting trends that if you do want some rain, the odd shower here and there, but perhaps a better chance towards the very end of April into the beginning of May, but not guaranteed, not seeing any reliable bands of rain and that sort of thing at the moment, but there could be more in the way of showery activity at least by this stage. So looking across Europe for next week, we've covered this week, let's look at next week. And you can see the blue colours there to the west of the UK. That's where pressure is lower than normal for the time of the year, averaged over the whole 7-day period, of course. Higher than normal pressure over Scandinavia, lower than normal pressure across South and Southeast Europe. So here we're likely to see quite a few showers, but the further north and west you go, the dry weather prevails. Now, quite cool conditions for the time of the year, dominating across Scandinavia, Eastern Europe, Western Russia, as you can see. Western Europe, though, with a flow coming up from the south at times, it is going to be fairly warm, above average temperatures, most likely. And it has to be said, yeah, there could be the odd night with a bit of frost, but actually, unless you've got some really cold air coming in from the north, at this time of the year, the nights are fairly short. The sun is out every day, adding heat to the ground. The frost itself tends not to be too severe by the time we get through to late April, early May. Now, it has to be said, frost is still a risk in general until mid to late May out in the countryside in the UK. So East Anglia, for example, the average date of the last air frost is actually in late May, but sometime around the 27th of May. So if you have got plants going out, just bear that in mind. We're not necessarily out of the woods yet when it comes to frost. It could take until perhaps mid to late May, even later sometimes, to finally get rid of the frost for the season. In terms of rainfall, we can see where that low pressure is near the Mediterranean. It's above average here. Elsewhere, though, across much of Europe, brown's dominating, drier than normal conditions prevailing, and indeed that includes much of the UK as well. As I say, toward the end of next week and the beginning of the following week, we may see some slightly higher chances of rain or showers developing towards the very end of April, early May. But then as we head deeper on into May, as I say, it's likely that high pressure towards the west of the UK will try to ridge back in again. So perhaps a little bit unsettled at first during this period, and then higher pressure rebuilding again as the week goes on. In terms of temperature, well, much of Europe at the moment showing as near or even above average, so likely to be warmer than normal for the time of the year. But again, there could be the odd chilly night if the winds are light and the skies are clear, but the nights are getting ever shorter at this stage in the year. And in terms of rainfall across the UK, it's near or slightly below average. Southern Europe still, though, coming up with above average with rain or showers here. Eastern Europe, though, below average, as you can see. And then for the final week of this particular period of interest, this takes us through towards the middle of May. High pressure still to the west of the UK. If anything, more of a cooler north-northwesterly flow potentially developing. So that may bring the temperatures down a touch, perhaps slightly increasing the threat of a little bit of overnight frost towards the middle of May. Still a long way out, and obviously that depends on how clear the skies are and how light the winds are. But temperatures here near normal, not a particularly strong signal either way at the moment across the UK. And in terms of rainfall, well, it's at the moment hinting at below average rainfall dominating because that high pressure is close by. But again, if the conditions are fairly slack, you can still get the odd afternoon and evening shower developing after the peak daytime heating. So not necessarily completely dry, but more often than not, dry weather prevails for the next few weeks, except for that period late April into early May. So a few isolated showers possible by the end of this week, but they won't be for everyone. Many places will still be dry. And then a greater chance perhaps of some showers, maybe even some slightly more organised bands of rain coming in towards the second half of next week, around the very end of April into the first part of May. But then it does look like at the moment, still early days, that high pressure may build back in again towards the middle of May. So things may actually become more settled again by this stage. But I will stress, long way off, and confidence at the moment of that happening is low in either case. So that gives you a recap of how things are looking for the next 4 weeks or so. Keep your comments and questions coming in, and as ever, you can keep up to date with the latest day-by-day forecast by following us on social media. Bye for now.